Oh, okay.
Oh,
I think we're live.
Okay.
We are live.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Econ Playground Podcast. I hope you guys have had a nice week since the last episode. And here we're back again. We're gonna talk about some econ. We're gonna talk about some interesting things. And before I go on, I want to introduce the guest that I have today. I've known him basically his whole life, and it's my friend John Halcovich.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm John.
Me and John are neighbors.
We go way back.
Yeah, we go way back. We have the same birthday.
Live literally across the street from each other.
Yes. So we have some history together. We'll just say that.
Indeed.
Yes. At one point we ran a YouTube gaming channel together called The Jolly Amigos.
Yeah, go check it out.
If you look, it's kind of a dead meme at this point, but but I'm sure somebody out there will find it interesting.
Someone will look it up.
Yeah. So this week I set up a little screen sharing thing. So some of the stuff that we talk about, I might actually be able to show you guys that are watching this in a video format, and you can look at it that way. And so that should be interesting. I don't know if it'll work that well, but yeah, I just plan to talk about a few things. One other thing. So this summer, I lent John some econ books, and one of the big ones was Basic Economics by Tom Sowell.
That was a good one.
Yes. What do you like about that book, and what do you like about Tom Sowell?
I think from reading that book, what I noticed, Tom Sowell gives a lot of these analogies for some pretty, when I was going through it, for some pretty, like, what I would think are complex, like, economic principles, but he really gave a lot of great historical, like, analogies to help me understand them. So I'd highly recommend that book for anyone who's looking to get into economics for the first time.
Yeah, I think that's the first, like, real big economics book that I read.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah. And he there's no math in the entire book. That maybe like some addition.
Yeah.
There's no like models or anything, nothing that you would even see in like an introductory econ class. It's almost like a pre-introductory econ class, introducts to basic concepts like scarcity and allocation and all that kind of stuff. And yeah. Okay. So that's the free advertising for this week. Last week we advertised The Invisible Hook, and this week we're advertising Basic Economics by Tom Sowell. So, yes. So this week I wanted to bring up some more papers from that same class. It's a very good class. I will say, if anybody of you are George Mason University attendants or econ students anywhere, try to take a econ history class, because that is just the most fun stuff you will ever find. So without further ado, I'm going to dig into a paper that I read last night. I literally just came back from this class, so it's like fresh on my mind.
It's fresh, yeah.
Yes, but so this paper is by William Baumol, who's a famous economist who unfortunately died last year, but he's contributed like a ton of stuff to the economic literature. So in this paper, he's talking about the concept of entrepreneurship. So, John, from a layman's perspective, what would you define entrepreneurship as?
I describe it as going out on your own, trying to make it in the world economy, using just your knowledge and trying to create, maybe it's a product, maybe an idea, something that the masses will use. Yeah, that's a rough definition, but
mostly you're correct. But the one thing that I'd add is that usually entrepreneurship has an element of creativity to it.
Oh, indeed.
So an element of doing something new. So yeah, right. Like you could like go and make it in the world by like selling potatoes, but people have done that for so long. Like the entrepreneur is the guy that tries the new thing, right? Mm-hmm. So what William Baumel's talking about here is about whether entrepreneurship is there's different levels of entrepreneurship in different countries. That's kind of what the hypothesis was, that some countries, because of the people in them or their culture or something, they have different levels of entrepreneurship that they have, and it benefits them or hurts them or something like that. But Baumol says basically that the supply of entrepreneurship is fixed, because entrepreneurship is sort of random, right? So it's not like you can predict it coming out of certain things or not. So he said he just assumes the supply is fixed, but what changes between societies is how the how entrepreneurship gets allocated. So you could have a whole bunch of creativity, but you can put it towards different uses. It can go towards productive uses or unproductive uses, right? So he uses a bunch of examples from throughout history. So if you were, let's say you're the son of a medieval lord, okay?
Okay.
How are you going to get wealth?
Well, I guess the most obvious thing would be, well, you could just inherit it, just, family already has money, so I will inherit that money when I'm older,
Okay, now let's say you're the third son of a noble, okay?
Right.
So usually the first son gets a lot more wealth.
Yeah, right.
So what if you're like the third son? Then what are you going to do?
You got to go out in the world and somehow make a name for yourself doing something.
Yeah, and most often in the medieval period, it was military, right?
Right.
So it was by invading and taking over other things. So the way that the rules of the game which is a term that Baumol brings up a ton. The rules of the game in medieval society was that the place that entrepreneurship was rewarded was in the military field. So think of all the great technologies of the Dark Ages. What are most of them?
Weaponry. Something to do with
something like weaponry. So the Dark Ages are usually called the Dark Ages because we say, oh, they were uncreative. Or when we think of like kings and knights and stuff like that, we just think of them being this like almost like robots, like complacent, just like they're living in the same society over and over again. We don't think of them as creative, but that's probably because where they were putting their entrepreneurship is not places that we put it today. So there's tons of other profitable places to be creative today that it wasn't back then, for example, right? Yeah. So it's all about the way that society is set up. It's all about the rules of the game, and not necessarily the natural resources that you have or like the genetics of your people. Yeah. It's mostly about the rules of the game that are going on around you. So that was pretty dang cool. And he uses some other examples that were kind of interesting, like that in the late Middle Ages also, most of the entrepreneurship came from monks, which was strange too, because they were the only people, they were the only people that had time, or they were the only people that were willing to invest in those kinds of things, right? Yeah. So, and then, so like, if you have an invader, right? What is or let's say the Soviet Union has just produced a ton of nuclear weapons. Okay. Where do you think that entrepreneurship is valuable to be allocated?
If I was in the
Soviet, if you were in the U.S. If you were in the U.S.
Oh, if I was in the U.S. I would say if the Soviet Union has a bunch of warheads, in the U.S., it would also be, entrepreneurship would also be valued in weaponry or something to combat that. Okay. Yeah. So even today, that kind of stuff happens. Yeah, exactly. So this isn't like it's not like they were dumber back then. It's that the rules were different. Yeah, that's interesting, because it's not like it's sort of just like a different way to think of the Dark Age and middle, it's not that. It's weird, I don't know. I think that's really interesting.
Yes. And but speaking of the Middle Ages, okay, the other papers that I wanted to bring up was we had a whole week where we talked about the medieval church, okay?
Okay.
And so they decided, okay, we're going to try and apply economic modeling to the Catholic Church and religion in general, I guess. So if the church, they wanted to treat the church like a firm. So if the church produces a good, what good would you say that that is?
Sort of selling the idea of God.
Okay, so like why would someone want to buy God?
Well, okay, I'd say it's the idea of that if you don't have, if you don't believe in God, if you don't buy into the idea of God or like a higher being, that you'll be sort of go to hell, and you'll be worse. You'll be better off for just going with the norm and saying that, yes, I'm a Christian, go along with it. And if not, then you'll be like eternally
damned.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So essentially, the way that they phrase it in the paper is that it's what the church sells is it sells salvation. Right here, during the Middle Ages, the Roman Catholic Church was the dominant firm in the salvation industry.
Ooh, right? I like that. I like that phrase.
So, so if you think when you have a firm that's the only firm that's able to offer a service, what do you call them?
A monopoly.
Right, exactly, a monopoly. It's on screen. You have a cheat code.
But, I do.
And interestingly enough, William Baumol had a theory about monopolies. This guy that wrote the last paper, where most people like to define a monopoly as somebody that has 100% of the market share, but that's not always the best definition, because sometimes there are cases where you can see someone that has 100% of the market share, but their prices are still really low, and they're still producing just as much as if there was a full-fledged market, right? So the real way that you should judge whether a firm has a monopoly or not is whether or not their industry is contestable, meaning can other firms enter? What are the barriers to entry and stuff like that?
Okay.
So in the medieval era, in the salvation industry, what are the barriers to entry, do you think?
I think one, if you were, I'm not sure if this would fall over if we were still talking about like the church in the context of a firm. I'm not sure if this would fall over like a competitor. If you would say you were a Muslim in the medieval ages trying to be converted, but that could, that's a potential barrier.
Yeah. Okay.
So someone of another religion.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking more like, if the church provides salvation, okay? That's the good that they provide. So if somebody else other than the Catholic Church wanted to provide salvation, what is the barrier to them doing that?
The barrier is
in Europe, at least. We'll say in Europe.
In Europe, barrier is the church that's been established. This firm is supposedly the only path in their eyes that can sell salvation. So any other things would be inferior.
Yeah. So like, so if some guy, so the belief that the people hold, the specific belief that the Catholic Church is the only proper church, or it's the only church that can give you genuine salvation, that is one of the barriers to entry. So if the people's beliefs start to change, the market around it starts to change as well. You see? So, did the people's beliefs ever change?
I don't think. I think not up until recently, pretty much. I mean, I still think. Like, what exactly do you mean? Like
I'm talking about the specific belief that the Roman Catholic Church is the only.
Okay. No. I don't think anyone who's bought into, anyone who's a Catholic in this, I don't think anyone would say that well, oh, you could go be, Muslim. They'll have salvation.
Okay, well, think about it just in the context of Europe. What happened in the year 1515? I think it was 1517.
1517. Oh gosh.
A specific man did a specific thing.
Oh, Henry VIII. Yep.
Not Henry VIII.
No.
Martin Luther.
Oh my gosh, I gotta brush up on
Martin Luther, big deal.
Yeah.
He basically, his actions started a whole period that they call the Wars of Religion, right?
Yeah.
When he gave his reasons that he thought the Catholic Church was not the only proper mode of salvation,
right.
And it threw people's belief systems all over the place.
Okay. I thought you were going Church of England route there for.
Oh well, yeah, that's the same thing. But the Church of England probably couldn't have existed if the people's beliefs had changed. If Henry VIII just said all of a sudden one day, "Oh, I'm just gonna change the church," people would have maybe. I'm not sure. People might have revolted,
maybe.
Right? Yeah. But if Martin Luther hadn't done so first, then yeah. But,
right.
Yeah, exactly. Martin Luther changed the beliefs of the Europeans, of many Europeans, and it lowered the barriers to entry, allowing people like the Anglican Church to show up.
Okay.
So the Anglican Church may have existed without Martin Luther, but it certainly helped. It certainly helped.
This is perfect because I'm reading Canterbury Tales right now.
Fantastic!
Yeah.
Good. I just was looking at a book that was free on Amazon called Top 100 Books You're Supposed to Read in Your Entire Life, and Canterbury Tales was on there.
Yeah, it's a good book.
But the way that they made that book is they took an analysis of every single Goodreads review and Wikipedia review and Amazon review and aggregated them all and then made a list that way. So you ended up having a bunch of Shakespeare plays, and then number one was the collected works of Shakespeare. So they had unnecessary repetitions, and then they had the Two Towers and the Fellowship of the Ring on there, but not the Return of the King. I don't know. It was so weird.
What the heck? Yeah.
Yeah. Can't just say the Lord of the Rings, the collected work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this graph that I have on screen here, I don't want to go too into details because this is more technical economics, but they have just for those of you that are interested, they make a distinction between the costs that the Pope is going to have to incur and the costs that local priests are going to have to incur. And that determines the different, I suppose you could call it the price of being a part of the Catholic Church that they expect you to pay in offerings. Yeah. So, yeah, that's weirder. I honestly don't even understand all of that to the T. So, yes, but that is good stuff. And they have another aspect of this paper on usury. Now, you know what usury is?
I've heard of it. No, I couldn't define it, though.
It's something that we actually use a lot all the time, but usury is just kind of a fancy word for it. It's a sin. It's the sin word for it, basically, which is it's all that it is making a loan with interest, right?
Oh, okay, yeah.
So many religions think that usury is a sin, and the Catholic Church at that time being one of them. And now, give me one of the top stereotypes about Jewish people. What would you say is one of the top stereotypes?
Are we going with regards to money?
Yes. So most stereotypes are inaccurate, but they exist for a reason, right?
Right.
So
I'd say there's a stereotype that Jews sort of hoard money and are stingy. Yeah, and they're the greedy class of people, right? And that actually comes from this time period. So if everybody in Europe is Catholic, right? Right. Then supposedly they're not supposed to be making loans, right? Right. For interest. So their loophole is, Their loophole is, well, we're not Catholic, so we're going to do it. Yeah. Because they did not think it was a sin, right? Right. And there might have been a similar dynamic going on in the Middle East because in Islam, you can't commit usury, but you can, but Jews can't. So Jews became the dominant people in finance in the Middle East as well as in Europe. And
So any stereotype that would have been assigned to bankers got assigned to Jews as well, because they were almost one and the same in Europe and the Middle East.
Right.
Yeah. So that's an interesting little thing. And but in this paper, they're not exactly sure why the Catholic Church would have wanted to uphold that belief. They said, why would it help their firm? You know, how would it help their profits?
Yeah.
And they said maybe a good portion of it is probably just like their spiritual integrity, because they're not denying that. I mean, it's kind of weird to talk about churches in an economic sense, because there's so many other aspects and motivations that we don't fit into normal, like just they're greedy and they want profit.
Yeah.
So, but one theory that they had is that they sort of used usury as leverage. So they show evidence of certain times that they allowed people to lend money if it was in the church's favor or something like that.
Yeah.
Or like, we'll let you lend money if you come and help us in the Crusades. That was a big thing.
Okay.
So it became sort of a gift that they could give out. So they made it illegal, and then their gift was the privilege of doing it.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that they gain as a monopoly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So moving on to another paper. Let me see. There was this paper is kind of an expansion on that last paper. It's written by the same guys. Okay. And it's on the Crusades. So if the let's say the Catholic Church is a monopoly, right? Mm-hmm. What do monopolies like to do?
Force people to take their product at whatever price they want.
Yeah, and but they can only affect the area that they have 100% market share over.
Yeah.
So if they want to increase profits, what would they have to do?
Grow the amount of potential buyers for that market.
Exactly. And what is one way of doing that? Invading the Middle East.
Right.
So
the natural thing to do.
Yes. So their theory here is that the Catholic Church was one of the reasons that the Catholic Church supported the Crusades was to expand, the boundaries of their market and to increase their profits and the rent that they would extract from the fact that they had followers in the Middle East. And there's actually sort of two competing theories on why the Crusades happened. So one is what you call the demand side theory, that the Catholic Church demanded the goods that were in that area, being the people that they can put under their under their religion. And the other theory is that there was a competitor, Islam, right? Mm-hmm. And they wanted to crush Islam before it started to get into Europe and take away from their profits in that way. So some of the part of the theory is that one interesting part of the theory is that there was actually some Islamic invasions in the past. Yeah. Like Muslims invaded Spain and stuff like that.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah. So the that theory seems like it has some holes in it, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm not so sure about that, because at the time Spain was not that well populated. The Catholic Church probably was not getting that much out of Spain. It was a pretty small territory. Yeah. They didn't really care about it. Spain, I don't know about you, but Spain seems like just like the weirdest country.
It's pretty. Yeah, I've been there. It's pretty strange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you go there?
2 summers ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's so weird. I don't know. I don't know if it's a major country or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of just there.
It was the biggest empire at one point, but also the year after it wasn't, and the year before that it wasn't also.
Yeah.
And a ton of people speak Spanish just because of that one year, basically,
Yeah,
for that one like short period of time. Not that short,
everywhere.
but relatively short.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Short.
I don't know. Yeah.
15 minutes of fame.
Yeah, the 15 minutes of imperial global fame.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay. So there are a few other. I also think that one of the reasons that they might not have invaded or cared about the Muslims invading Spain at that time is that like they had no idea what Islam was. Islam was way newer, but by the time of the Crusades, Islam had built a reputation of we're a big religion and we're here to stay.
Yeah.
So but when they were invading Spain, it might as well have been like the Mormons invading Spain. Like, who are these guys?
Yeah. Oh, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. So So in the paper, they kind of imply that they say, oh, the supply theory is bunk. It's all about the demand. But I'm not so sure about that. I think that there's definitely a strong case for both. And another interesting little nugget they bring up is about how perhaps there was just a demand for like relics, because there's a big thing more common with Catholics where they'll care about like various holy artifacts. Like they'll say like, oh, this is the cloth of St. Peter or something like that.
Canterbury Tales.
Yeah. And so like that might be one of the reasons that and so many of those artifacts were found during the Crusades, or they were taken during the Crusades or something like that. Right. So yes. And then so I'll just go over one last paper. This one's on another competitor of the Catholic Church. So but this paper is titled Witch Trials, okay?
Oh, okay.
And one of the authors, Peter Leeson, is the same guy that wrote The Invisible Hook, the same guy that wrote the paper that we talked about last episode on human sacrifice.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, he's a pretty cool professor. He talks about all sorts of stuff. And so the basic thesis of this paper is, okay, so people talk all the time about like witch trials throughout European history. Like, why the heck did they have them, right?
Right.
And it seems so strange that they had like witch trials, and they were just like random, and they were just, oh, we've got to like take over, or we've got to like stop these witches. They're all over the place, and it was like like almost like a mania over it. Yeah. And many people don't realize, but for a good portion of time before the 1600s, before a certain time, I'll say, the Catholic Church actually denied the prevalence of witches. And
I didn't know that.
Like throughout most of the Dark Ages and the medieval period, but the peasants still believed in them. And the peasants kept saying, like, we demand, like, we want the church to come and exorcise these witches or take these witches out. Mm-hmm. But the costs of incurring those kind of witch trials were very heavy for the Catholic Church, and they really didn't want to do it. But a big switch happened, and it was right after, guess who showed up? It's our old friend, Martin Luther, right? Martin Luther is a little thorn in the side of the Catholic Church's monopoly on salvation. And he says, like, no, the Catholic Church is not the only people that can offer salvation. And then Europe is in turmoil, basically, because of this. The wars of religion are happening. And so their theory is that in a normal market, when there's multiple firms, how do they compete with one another? Like, if I want more people to buy my product than your product, how do we compete?
Market it, market your product is better. Try to undermine the competition.
And but what particular factor would make me want to buy from one guy over another?
That yours is better.
Don't think of quality. Think of. Can you
Yeah.
see when I highlight things?
Yeah.
Yes. Think about this. Think about this. Yes. Yeah. Price. So that's maybe the simplest way we could say that people can compete with firms compete with one another. But it's not exactly clear how you would compete on price in offering salvation, because there's not a well-defined price. It's kind of like, I want you to invest time in my church, or invest your energy in my church, but it's not like $5 to enter. Most churches, there are very few churches. It would be kind of weird if a church said like, $5 to enter.
Yeah.
People would become very suspicious and would probably not attend that church.
Yeah.
And so what they the theory is that the Catholic Church said all of a sudden, like, okay, how are we going to win people back over from our new competitor? We'll offer a new service that we hadn't offered before: witch trials. We'll exorcise witches. And so this is just their basic theory, but they bring in a lot of empirical evidence to back it up. Stuff like the fact that the countries that were more exclusively Catholic, or more exclusively Protestant, had very few witch trials, whereas the ones with a lot of tension had a lot more. So Spain, which was pretty much exclusively Catholic, had very, very few witch trials. Right. And Italy had very, very few witch trials. But Germany and France were a hotbed for these sort of displays of power by either Catholic or Protestant churches.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a cool little look into it supports the it supports the validity of the economic way of looking at the church, and also gives us a little cool look into to a form of non-price competition.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that this paper is actually pretty easy to read, and if anybody wants to read like sort of an economic paper, this is one that is worth looking into.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. What were you going to say?
But between this and the other paper, when you sort of look at the church as a whole, as a firm, it's sort of all these decisions make, economically make sense. When you think of it as, if you were to take away sort of the morality of a church, that they're not in it for price, if you sort of got rid of, not price, for profit and everything, if you sort of take that away, a lot of these decisions sort of make sense.
Yeah.
Not all, but Crusades, expand your market.
Yeah. It's really strange because people don't like to that's why people kind of restrict their mind when they say what is economics about? Oh, it's about money or something like that, right? Yeah. But profit is really about utility, things you desire. So as soon as you replace the word money or monetary profit with desire or human, endeavors, then all of a sudden 3,000 more avenues of economic analysis open up,
right?
Which is kind of, I think, what is I've pretty much understood that for a while, but this class makes it so much more fun to understand that. Yeah, and they go over some other theories of why people think that witch trials went up and stuff like that, and they say, oh, these theories are stupid. So you can agree or disagree with them. So I just think this is a cool little perspective. But yes, that's all I really have prepared for today. So yes, is there anything else that you wanted to mention?
No, I really thought that was really interesting. It opened my mind to a lot.
Yes.
I didn't really think of, before I read each of those papers, I didn't really think of the Middle Ages and the church as a whole sort of like that. But when you think of it from an economist's perspective, a lot of this makes sense.
Yeah,
lots of more sense.
Yeah, lots of people have a really reductive view of the Middle Age mind, I guess, right? Yeah. But it's that they were actually pretty intelligent. They were pretty smart.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And so I hope you guys have enjoyed this endeavor into, I guess, it kind of became an episode. It was mostly about the Catholic Church, but kind of an endeavor into middle-aged economics, right? The economics of the Middle Ages. So yes, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, John,
Oh, thank you for having
attending.
me. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, attending is the right word, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
Appearing, for being a guest, and yes, we hope to see you again in the future. Leave your comments, subscription button, click that, like, don't dislike, whatever. Be honest, really.
And check out the Jolly Amigos.
Yes, check out I'll put the link in the description to the Jolly Amigos. There's some classic good videos on there. So it's some real quality content. Yes. So yes. What did I say at the end of last episode? Catch you on the slide. Or something like that. Catch you, like,
I can't remember.
It was like catch you on the supply slide. Yeah, that's what it was.
I like that.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.